Welcome to the All Clear Firefighter Wellness Podcast, where grit meets growth and excuses get burned away. This is about mental, physical, and personal growth. Light your fire within. Let's get after it. All clear, where the truth cuts through. Today on All Clear, we're going to talk about wearable tech when it comes to fitness tracking. Now, how many of you honestly feel recovered after a 24-hour shift? Maybe you realize this, but we operate in fragmented sleep, repeated adrenaline spikes, elevated heart rates around 2 a.m. in the morning when we have to get up, years of sympathetic nervous system overload. Those are common in the fire service. Now, the dangers that brings are pretty normal for us. We tend to normalize it. We say things like, I feel fine. It's just the job. I've been doing this for 20 years. But our body keeps score. We have to be careful about the long-term effects of our health, and we can't just judge it by how we feel. And that's where wearable tech comes in place. Now, many people, when they think of wearable tech, they think about things like this. The good old-fashioned, and it's disappearing right there, the good old-fashioned smartwatch. Now, there are different types of smartwatches. Maybe you've got an Apple Watch or a Garmin. Boy, they can do everything but make coffee for you. They notify you when you got a message, and it measures your heart rate and all that. I have a Casio GBD 200. Which is a sort of smartwatch, but I can shut it off. We'll talk about smartwatches another day. But there's a place for the smartwatch, and that's great when you're working out. But I want to talk about something a little different. I want to talk about the ring, the smart ring. Now, there are many different ones on the market, but the one that I've started wearing for the last couple of months, probably for about the last 6 months, is the Nova Ring R. And it has become a powerful ally in my health tracking. It's not a gadget, but it's a recovery intelligence tool. Well, why do we want to use a ring? Why do we want that instead of a watch? Well, firefighters are used to watches. We all have our G-Shocks. We all have, the watches that are basically bulletproof. And there's a place for that. They're functional. They're durable, but when it comes to biometric tracking and recovery, it can be lacking. But when you look at something like a wearable ring, like the Nova Ring, you really start to see some advantages. First of all, think about it this way. A ring is much more lightweight, and it has a ton of advantages. It's built for 24/7 wear. And it's especially good during sleep. Now, the Nova Ring is lightweight, it's low profile, it doesn't dig into your wrist at night, and it doesn't snag on the sheets or your bunker gear if you have to hop out and put on your turnout gear quickly in the middle of the night. If you wear it at night, you forget about it. But if you have a watch, maybe you take it off, it doesn't track you at night, and your sleep is probably the most critical window when it comes to looking at our health, particularly for sleep and recovery. With a ring, being able to track these things is much easier. Now, why a ring? Well, think about it this way. When you look at the human hand, your finger has a lot of advantages for doing health tracking. It's dense in the capillary beds. You have a stronger pulse in your finger than you do even at your wrist. And typically during sleep, there's less motion with your hands. That means when a ring is tracking you, you have a more stable heart rate tracking. Your HRV readings tend to be much more consistent, and it's more accurate in detecting the stages of sleep. Now, for firefighters who move constantly on shift, they need accurate data. But at night, it's especially important. Now, the other nice thing about a ring, like the Nova Ring, for example, is It has no screen. It's passive data. It's a silent sentry. It watches your health. It keeps measuring even when you don't think about it. It doesn't distract you. It doesn't buzz constantly to tell you you've got a new text message. It doesn't demand your attention. It collects the data, like we said, quietly. Now, for firefighters, that's ideal. We already live in stimulus overload many times, and the tools we use for recovery should not add to the stress that we already have. Now, we talked about how rings are good at tracking sleep. We know that sleep is the foundation of firefighter longevity. Now, if you only talk about one benefit from using a ring like the Nova ring, it's sleep. Firefighters constantly experience interrupted REM cycles. We suppress deep sleep, especially after calls. It's hard to get back into that point. We have elevated heart rates, particularly overnight in the middle of the night. If you have to get up for a lift assist or something in the middle of the night, it can really wreck your heart rate. And also we have cortisol spikes around 3 or 4 a.m. just because our cycles can be that far off. Now, the Nova ring tracks total sleep time. Now, this is something that I've really benefited from myself. One of my issues has always been sleep. I get sleep, but it's not always great sleep. But the nice thing about using a sleep tracking ring is that it can track your sleep stages. For example, we have deep sleep. That's when our body repairs itself. That's when our muscles rebuild after a hard workout. That's the part that can be easily suppressed, particularly if we have to go out in the middle of the night. Then we have our REM sleep. Our REM sleep is for brain recovery. That rapid eye movement, that's the sleep where our dreams kind of put things back together. It helps us get rid of mental fog the next day. It helps us kind of process all the little bits and pieces floating around in our brain. Trust me, it's very, very important. And also we have light sleep. That's just the time like when you're just laying in the bed, kind of in between the other phases. And then finally we have the awake time. That's when you get up to go to the bathroom in the middle of the night. Or in our line of work, it could be when you get up to go to a call at 2:30 in the morning. Now, as we talked about before, there are many phases of the sleep that we need to look at. Deep sleep, we talked about how it helps with muscle repair, but it also helps with things like hormone balance and immune function. If you're not getting enough deep sleep, you can catch a cold a lot easier. I know that sounds really old-fashioned, like a wives' tale, but it's really true. Your overall health can be affected if you're not getting enough deep sleep. But when we talk about that REM sleep or that rapid eye movement sleep, that really helps kind of clear out all the trash in our heads and kind of it's like defragging your computer. It gives us cognitive sharpness. It gives us stress resilience. It really helps us be able to deal with the mental aspects of our life. Now, when we have a deficiency in deep sleep and REM sleep, we see issues such as resting heart rates. We see a higher risk for injury and cardiovascular strain builds, things none of which we want to have. But when we have a ring, like the Nova ring, you'll start to see patterns. Like you might notice how back-to-back shifts crush your deep sleep. You might know that right off the bat. You might also notice that drinking alcohol will wipe out your HRV. Maybe you feel crummy the next morning after you've had a few too many the night before. Well, kind of helps you understand where you are with that. And finally, it helps you track your caffeine intake. If you drink a cup of coffee after 2 o'clock in the afternoon, is it going to keep you awake at night? Well, guess what? When you have a tool that passively monitors your sleep, you'll be able to really determine what's going on with that. Now, in addition to sleep, another thing that a ring is really good at measuring is your HRV, or your heart rate variability. Now, this is one of the most important numbers that firefighters should be tracking. Now, that variation is the time, or the variation in the time between heartbeats. It reflects your nervous system balance. If you have a high HRV, it means your body's adaptable, it's fully recovered, it's ready to go. But if your HRV is really low, or if you have a lower number, that means you're stressed. It means you're overloaded. But why does the HRV number matter in the fire service? Well, we live in sympathetic overdrive all the time. When we have things like tones dropping, we have heart rate spikes, we have adrenaline surges, we have hypervigilance as a norm whenever we're constantly, on alert, on a scene, on the side of the road, whatever the case. When we have something like the Nova Ring, it can track the HRV trends overnight when your body is supposed to be in recovery mode. Now, when your HRV trends downward over weeks, your recovery is compromised. Ultimately, overtraining risk will rise. Your time in the gym could be very dangerous. You also have an increased likelihood for illness. We mentioned the cold or the flu. It drops your immune system. But also, that's when burnout can creep in and really wear you out mentally. So, here are some questions. Are you actually recovered? Should you be at your max effort today? Or should you just be maybe working on your mobility? Is your stress load accumulating? Those are tactical decision-making things that we need to take into consideration. And a lot of that goes back to our physiology. Well, let's look at a real world example. Say you get 6 hours of sleep after a really busy shift. Honestly, you feel okay. But when you look at the numbers on your app, which is attached to your ring, you notice elevated resting heart rate. You see a suppressed HRV number. You see reduced deep sleep on your charting. So, how can you use that to make you better? Well, instead of crushing heavy deadlifts in the gym, maybe you need to slow down for the day. You need to hydrate more. Maybe you need to go take a walk, do some mobility work, and especially go to bed early. Now, if you take that and multiply it time after time over a 20-year career, that can really make the difference between sustainable performance and breakdown. Now, firefighters face elevated risk of things like cardiac events, chronic inflammation, sleep disorders, metabolic dysfunction, hormonal imbalances. Those are all things that are not new to us. But when we have a tool in our toolbox like the Nova Ring, it allows for long-term trend tracking. Tried to say that 3 times fast. Is your resting heart rate raising over the years? Has that HRV number been declining shift after shift? Is your sleep becoming more fragmented as you get older, or maybe it's getting a little worse? When we look at something like a diagnostic ring, it's a tool. It's not a diagnostic tool. It's an awareness tool. And awareness drives better behavior, and it drives positive change. Ultimately, we need to protect the protector. We can obsess over our gear, our SCBA maintenance, our PPE condition. We can do, vehicle checks or apparatus checks all day long. But who checks on your nervous system? Well, the Nova Ring does. It works quietly. It tracks your sleep, your HRV. It gives recovery intelligence, and it helps firefighters train smarter and live longer. You can't improve what you don't measure. Ultimately, for firefighters, recovery isn't optional. It's operational readiness. Now, when you look at the Nova Ring, one of the things that I really like about it is the fact that there is no monthly fees. You don't have to buy a subscription to some software package like you do with some other rings. It works and it tracks. I have honestly tried about 4 different rings, from the cheapest ones you can get on Amazon. And each one is okay. But the one that really made the difference to me was the Nova Ring, because the price of it is not the cheapest, but is by no means the most expensive. But the good thing about the Nova Ring, as I mentioned, there's no monthly fees with it, and the software is great. The software has AI baked into it, which will help make recommendations when it looks at things like your sleep tracking history, when it looks at things like your HRV number. It'll help you determine if after you work out, are you resting enough? How's your recovery going? So these are all things that having a good quality sleep tracking ring can do. More importantly, as we mentioned before, it doesn't distract you. It keeps you focused. When you're in your gear, you put your glove on, you forget about it. Unlike having a watch, which has a place, it just doesn't get in the way. Now, is it good at tracking your workouts? You can. The nice thing about the Nova Ring, it gives a bunch of different options for different workouts you're doing. It does okay at that. But ultimately, the way that this will benefit people in our industry is by tracking your sleep and tracking your HRV. Those are the metrics that will make a difference. Now, we're not here to sell you a product, but I tell you, this has made a difference for me when it came to tracking my sleep. And as I try different things to improve it, I can see whether it's working or not. Also, as I'm working out, it's helping me be more efficient in my recovery. So when we look at trackable technology, when it comes to tracking our health, it's very critical. It doesn't replace going to the doctor. It doesn't replace knowing what you're doing. What it'll do will be that silent sentry. This keeps track of your well-being. So as we say here on All Clear, we encourage people to be the best firefighter they can, be the best version of themselves, and most importantly, light your fire within. That's a wrap. All clear. Like, subscribe, and watch the video on YouTube. Do it now. Shout out to the North Carolina Firefighter Cancer Wellness Alliance, keeping our crews alive and strong. Hit allclearpodcast.com for every past episode. Grab your battalion newsletter. No spam, no selling, just the real deal. Stay sharp, watch your six, and we'll see you on the next call.